Hey, this is John. Welcome to SysEng Quick. For the past few months, I've been using a GNOME extension called Paper WM that turns it into a scrollable tiling window manager. I love the scrolling concept because new windows aren't forced to fit in to the existing space because you have infinite horizontal space to work with, which is an amazing idea. However, Paper WM has a few quirks that are bugging me. For example, if I drag a tab out of my browser, it might mess up the entire workspace layout. New windows get pushed up above the title bar, and I haven't found any resolution other than a restart. And despite me telling Paper WM to launch windows with 50% horizontal space, they sometimes launch just a bit larger, forcing me to resize them so that two windows can fit side by side without constantly shuffling over by a few pixels every time I switch apps. And honestly, GNOME itself just feels kind of heavy, and I'm not a huge fan of the interface. Now, I've been using Neri for a few days now, and I think it's completely worth daily driving for a while. It's a standalone, scrollable tiling window manager written in Rust, and was even inspired by Paper WM, so the transition has been very smooth. I'm recording this episode on a Neri desktop right now. In this video, I'll show you how to install Fedora on Proxmox, and set up a basic Neri desktop so you can try it out for yourself. In future videos, I plan to automate this process with Kickstart and Ansible, but for now, we'll be doing everything by hand. Let's get started. Okay, I've got Proxmox open, so let's go ahead and create a new VM. I'm going to call it Fedora-Neri. We'll go ahead and select the Fedora Workstation 42 ISO that I have already downloaded. You can use any of the Fedora spins, though your mileage may vary. The Workstation spin is based on GNOME, and it includes the GNOME portal, which Neri uses by default for some things. If you don't have that, you may have to look for alternative portals. I had to install the GNOME portal in XFCE to do screen sharing, for instance, although there may be alternate ways of doing that. But I won't be showing that off in this video. We're going to go with Fedora Workstation. I'm going to change graphics card to Virtual GPU so we get accelerated graphics, and I'll enable the QEMU agent. I'll go ahead and enable disk cards because I'm using an SSD. We'll change this to 4 cores, and I'll leave it at the default V2 AES socket type or CPU type. And we'll switch to 8 gigs of RAM. Pair virtualized VirtIO network card is fine. I'll disable the firewall, although I don't think it matters. And we'll go ahead and click Start After Created and click Finish. Then when it comes up, we'll go ahead and launch the console. We'll go ahead and tell it not to test it. Just go ahead and start the workstation. Okay, once the live installer starts up, we will be given the option to install Fedora, which we're going to do. This is a relatively new installer, not the Anaconda installer that I am familiar with. It asks very few questions here, so mostly you configure things after you install, but that's fine. We'll go ahead and leave it at English and the US keyboard layout. I'm going to use the entire disk. I'm not going to encrypt things. And everything looks fine for the few options we have, so I'll go ahead and select Erase Data and Install. It'll take a few minutes to install, so I'll be back when that is finished. Once the installer has finished, we'll go ahead and select Exit to Live Desktop, and we'll go ahead and restart into our new Fedora installation. When it first starts, it's going to ask us a few more questions to set up our environment. So we'll leave it at English for the language for GNOME. Same thing for the keyboard layout. I'm going to leave the privacy settings alone, but disable them if you want. It's going to ask us for a time zone. I'm in the Eastern time zone, so Atlanta, Georgia, this should be fine. I don't need to enable any of the third-party repos, so I'm going to skip that. And it wants to know a few details. I'm going to say our name is Proxmox and keep it the username as Proxmox. We'll need to give it a password, so I'll put something in that I can remember, even if it's not super secure. And then we will start using Fedora Linux, which puts us in our new GNOME environment. So I'm going to go ahead and skip this tour since we're not going to be using GNOME. And we're ready to start installing things. So the first thing I think we should do is update all of the packages. So let's go ahead and hit the super key and open the terminal. We'll go ahead and make that bigger. You can see it left us with the default hostname from the live installer. If you want to change that, we can do sudo hostnamectl set-hostname and the hostname of your choice. I'm going to call it Fedora Neri. And now we can do sudo dnf upgrade-y to upgrade all of our packages. Since we're on Fedora 42 and Fedora 43 is close to coming out, we have quite a few packages to update. This will take a bit, so I'll be back when it is complete. Okay, now that our system is up to date, I want to make sure I have a useful editor for this. So I'm going to go ahead and install Vim over Nano. I want to do sudo dnf install Vim default editor, and I'm going to say -- allow erasing to allow it to erase the default Nano editor and replace that with Vim. If you don't want to use Vim, you don't have to run this command. You can leave it with Nano or whatever editor you want to use. But I prefer Vim, so we're going to do that. Okay, I think we're finally ready to install Neri and replace GNOME with that. To install Neri, we need to enable its copper. So let's do sudo dnf copper enable Yalter, who is the author of Neri, /Neri. So he makes his own copper for Fedora. I love that. And just need to give it our password and tell it, yes, I do want to enable this. And now we can install Neri. So we'll do sudo dnf install -y Neri. And there are a couple other things I would like to have on here. You may or may not need them for your system, but I like to install Blueman applet so we can control Bluetooth things. There's no Bluetooth in this Fedora virtual machine, obviously, but if you had Bluetooth, you would probably want that. We'll go ahead and install Network Manager applet so we control our network devices, set up VPN, set up wireless, things like that. And I'm going to do PA Systray, which is a volume control for Pulse Audio. So we'll go ahead and tell it to install all of those things, and it's going to install all of the dependencies that it needs for Neri and everything else that I asked for. And once that's done, we should be able to exit this GNOME session and go into Neri. So let's see if that actually works now. Let's go ahead and close this terminal. And we'll go to the GNOME menu, and I will say I want to log out. I will select my Proxmox user, and in the bottom right hand, we'll see the gear icon. I will change from the GNOME session to the Neri session, and I will log back in. And there we go. It's created a default config file at home proxmox.config niri config.kdl, and it shows the important hotkeys by default whenever you log in. I do like that. That's a great new user orientation. I've got most of the hotkeys down because they're very similar, maybe identical to Paper WM, but if you didn't have that, it's nice to have in there. And I believe these will update even if you change the keybinds in the configuration. So this is a great user interface. I love that. Let me see. Let me move my camera down so you can see the rest of the Waybar. Okay, so we do have the Waybar set up. You can see we've got the volume control with PA sys control, and we've got the network manager. It did not start BlueMan applet because there are no Bluetooth controllers in this virtual machine, so it actually can't start. So it looks pretty good right now. Let's look and see if we can change the resolution because I think it's at a higher resolution than I want right now. So we need to open a terminal for Neri. To do that, we can either press the super key with T to launch the default terminal, which is Alacrity, or we can do Super D to open the app launcher, which by default is Fuzzle, but you can change that. And we can search for terminal and use the GNOME terminal if we wanted. So either one will work. I'm going to go ahead and use Alacrity. So let's go ahead and exit this. And I will fix the font so you can actually see this. And we'll move on. I don't actually use Alacrity, but I think we can edit the file alacrity.toml. And add a font section, and let's just go with size 24 font, and let's restart that. There we go. That should be more readable. Okay, so Alacrity looks pretty good now. I think we should be able to use this to edit our Neri configuration, and there are a couple of things I'd like to change. So I'm going to hit Super F to make this full width. And let's go ahead and edit that default config file that it generated. I'm going to use vim /.config niri config.kdl. So there are a couple of things I would like to change here. For instance, by default, it just configures the monitors however it finds them. And that may be fine or it may not be fine depending on what it found for you. So this section here is commented out, but it shows us an example of how you would configure a display output. So let's go ahead and quit this, and let's do Neri message outputs. This will give us the outputs that it found. So it has the preferred size of 2560 by 1440 at 75 Hertz, and it has a lot of other available modes. I would like to set it to 1920 by 1080. So let's see how we would change that. First of all, the output is virtual-1 because I don't have an E DisplayPort output. So let's go ahead and make that change in our Neri configuration. So let's make a new section right under here. We'll say output. Remember to not put the /dash here. That comments out a section. Then I want to say virtual-1, and we'll go ahead and open up a new section, and I will say mode 1920 by 1080 at 60.000. Close that, and close this section. Now we can go ahead and save this file. And you can see it automatically changed our screen resolution. That is because every time you save the configuration, it reloads it automatically. It's not like Sway or i3 where you have to explicitly reload your configuration. I do like that it loads automatically. So let's go ahead and edit the configuration. There's a couple other things I think we'll probably want to change. The first one, I want to search for Waybar. So right here, we've got this line that says spawn at startup Waybar. This is like i3 or Sway, where it launches a program whenever you start the Neri session, but it won't launch it every time you restart Neri. So it's a one-time startup. However, Neri has a good idea, I thought, which was using systemd unit files to start up services. This isn't unique to Neri. Other desktops do this too. GNOME does this extensively, but I had not seen that before, and I love the idea for a few things I'll show you a little bit later. But I don't want it to spawn it here like this, so I'm going to comment this out. So we'll just put 2 slashes to comment out this line so that it won't start Waybar from Neri in the configuration. Now, the next thing I want to search for is CSD. That stands for Client-Side Decorations. Generally, when we have a tiling window manager, we want to use all the available space and not waste them on window decorations such as the Alacrity title bar. That's taking up space that I think we really don't need in a tiler. So let's go ahead and remove the comment from this line, and we'll get the prefer no client-side decorations. So we'll go ahead and save this file, and nothing happened. What's up with that? So we prefer no client-side decorations, but it only applies that to a window when it first launches. So we did reload the Neri configuration, but it won't take effect for this window, only the next terminal that we launch, or whatever window might have client-side decorations that we're going to ignore. Let's go ahead and hit Super T, and you can see we do have a new terminal without the window decorations. So I'll go ahead and close this terminal and use this one instead. Okay, that's a good start to Neri. Let's go ahead and configure Waybar, because although it looks like it is working, there are a few things that are broken, but you kind of can't tell right now because most of it does work. So let's go ahead and copy the default Waybar configuration. We can do that with cp-r/etc xdg waybar and then ~/.config to copy it into our config directory. Now this entire Waybar directory is in our /config directory. So we can edit the ~/.config waybar config.jsonc. Now I'm not going to show you how to do a lot of extensive customization to Waybar. The point of this video is to get Neri up and running. So the only thing I'm going to do is replace all the instances of Sway with Neri, and that will work well enough for our purposes. There aren't actually all of these modules equivalently, but it will still work for what we need. So if you want to figure Waybar further, you'll need to do that on your own. Since I'm in Vim, I can do $s/sway/Neri and do G to stop everything globally. So now I've replaced 8 instances of Sway with Neri. Now, do all those work? Well, no, but it actually will ignore the non-functional configuration, so it's fine for now. We'll go ahead and save that. And again, nothing changed because we need to restart Waybar for it to take effect. But we only have it spawning at startup from the configuration. Now I could kill the Waybar process and restart it, but I want to show you how to do it with systemd instead because that's my preference. So Waybar already has a systemd user file, so we can do systemctl --user add-once neri.service waybar.service. This is saying I need Neri to want the Waybar service to start when it starts. So instead of launching it from the configuration, we're going to tell systemd to start it, and that will allow us to restart it from systemd as well, which I find is a really nice benefit, especially if you're making a lot of modifications to your Waybar. So now that we have that, let's go ahead and see how that would work. We need to restart the Neri session. So I'm going to close this terminal, and we will exit the Neri session. We have 2 options for that. We can type Control-Alt-Delete, or we can do Super-Shift-E by default, and we'll say, yes, I want to exit this Neri session. Now we'll go back into Proxmox and log back in. And you can see that it looks slightly differently, or maybe you can, I'm not sure how big this is. But we have our workspaces now, and we have our language setting correct. And if we had a window, we'd see the title. So let's launch Alacrity, and you can see it does say Alacrity, our terminal window. And now we have 2 workspaces. because workspaces on Neri are dynamic and are created whenever there is space. So if we don't have any windows, there's no reason to have a second workspace. And when I go to it, it will simply remove it. So there we go, we're back to one workspace. If we go ahead and launch the terminal again, we'll have another workspace that we can go to with super page down or page up. Okay, so Waybar is now configured, or at least as configured as I plan to do for this video. So let's make a couple more changes to Neri. I would like to add a background because the background is just plain gray right now. Let's add that Fedora background that it has by default. So you can find that in User Share Backgrounds, Fedora 42 default. I think it's this. So yeah, Fedora 4201day.jxl. I'm not really sure what a JXL file is, but it's an image apparently. So let's go ahead and copy that. And then we'll need to make a new systemd unit file because there is no systemd unit file for Sway background, unlike the one that already existed for Waybar. So we're going to do vim /config. And then I want to go to systemd user swaybg.service. And we need to make a service file. I'm going to copy the service file from the Neri wiki. So let's go ahead and open that. I will do super D to launch the application launcher. And we'll go ahead and launch Firefox. And you see it launched to the side, but it didn't make the window shrink. That's the scrollable part. I love that. I go back to this window, we have full screen, and I can go back and forth. If I take that off, now I have two windows side by side. So I find that very nice. So let's search for Neri Wiki. And we'll go to the new wiki. And we'll go over to Usage, Example, Systemd Setup. And it tells you how to set up Sway Idle and Sway Background, which we'll be doing. So let's go ahead and copy this default file, and we will insert and paste that into here. Let's make that full screen again. Okay, so we are going to set up this unit file to start Sway Background to fill the background with whatever picture is in here. And their image is in the home directory /pictures/lakeside.ping. But I don't have that, so I want to use the default Fedora image instead. So let's go ahead and delete the image they had in here. Let's go ahead and copy this again. And let's put that in the quotes. So now our background will be this default Fedora image. We'll go ahead and save that. And now I want to make the other service as well. But we need to make sure that Neri will start this whenever Neri starts. So just like we did for Waybar, we're going to go ahead and make it a want for the Sway background service. So system control user add once neri.service sway background.service. There we go. Now we can go ahead and edit the next one, which is the Sway idle service. So I'm going to do vim /config systemd user sway idle.service. And again, I will go copy this from the wiki. Now we'll go ahead and paste that in there. And this is going to set up our Sway idle configuration, which is a way of doing things on a timeout or on certain events. So this is mostly going to help us to auto-lock the screen when it's been idle for a while, turn off our monitors, and lock things before it goes to sleep. So by default, they set a timeout of 601 seconds, or 1 second past 10 minutes, and it will send an action message to Neri to turn off the monitors. It does this because at the 600 second, the 10-minute mark, it locks a screen using Sway lock. And also, before the system is put to sleep, it also locks a screen with Sway lock. So it's up to you if you want to change these. I'm going to change it just slightly. For instance, 10 minutes is a bit slow for me, or a bit fast for me, so I'm going to change that to 900 seconds or 15 minutes. And then we'll change this to 960 seconds rather than 901 because I actually prefer it doesn't immediately power off the monitors. I would like it to lock the screen and then give me a minute before it turns the monitors off, because that's annoying if I didn't want things to go to sleep. So I'll give it another minute before it actually goes to sleep. Okay, let's go ahead and save this. And once again, we're going to do the system control user add once Neri service for the sway idle service. There we go. And because we have made new systemd unit files, we need to do system control -- user daemon -reload. Okay, now system control knows about our new unit files. So we can go ahead and restart our session to see if everything is working. So I'll close the terminal, I'll close the browser, and we will exit the Neri session. And now we can log back in. Go ahead and put in my super secure password. And you can see we do have our background image now. So that looks like it worked. If we open our terminal, let's do a ps-aux for sway idle. Hey, it's running. But that's not a very good way to find it. It's much better to use systemd. So let's do system control -- user status sway idle. And you can see it is loaded and running. I do love that, because now I know what command it's running, and systemd will restart it if it crashes for any reason, which it wouldn't do on that spawn at startup command in the Neri configuration. Another nice reason to have this. Same thing for our sway background. You can see it's got that stuff in there. And the waybar. And the waybar is very useful, because if we wanted to restart that before, we would have to find the process and then kill it. So we could do pkill waybar or grep for the process with ps-aux. We'd have to do something to find the process to kill it. But now we can do system control -- user restart waybar, and it restarts that. So if we change the waybar configuration, which I do plan to do, it's much easier to restart this from systemd. I do like this model rather than just launching commands from the configuration. But that model might be more familiar to someone coming from i3 or sway. Okay, I think that's everything I wanted to cover in this video. We have a working Neri setup on Fedora Linux. It's not very customized, but it is completely functional, and you can use it to do whatever you want. There are lots more settings and things you can change in here to make things better, but we'll probably do that in a later video when I do some of the automation work. I hope that you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please hit those like and subscribe buttons. Come back and see us next time. Thanks for watching.